Are we in some way, do you think, witnessing more than Senator McCain's passing? Is there something that he represented as a public servant that is dying with him?
I hope it's not dying with him, and he'd be the first to say that it shouldn't die with him and that it won't die with him, because he had great faith in America. I mean, it's unfortunate that President Trump doesn't have the grace and decency just to lower the flag to half-mast for this week. It's done for sitting senators who die, not only for senators like McCain, who are, major figures, obviously, in American history. I wonder if Secretary Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, will actually order flags at military bases around the world to fly at half-staff or not. Secretary Pompeo could do the same for embassies. I think that might be a nice gesture by the two leading cabinet secretaries, that they're not on board sort of the pettiness of the president, and that the country as a whole acknowledges this man and what he stands for, both as just we should acknowledge every sitting senator, really, but also obviously an extraordinary career of service to the country.
One of the things we've heard about John McCain, and it's not surprising to people who know him, is that in his final months, he was obviously very concerned about the direction the country was going in, that in his way, through tweets, even in the final months, he let it be known the things that he thought. And so in that spirit, I want to read a headline from the Washington Post. McCain's death marks a new era for congressional checks on Trump. And the article points out that McCain, quote, used his chairmanship of the Senate Armed Services Committee to question the president's stance on issues such as Russia, torture, and immigration. Mike, can you put into some perspective for us the loss of Senator McCain as it relates to foreign policy, as it relates to our national security?
Well, I think the entire purpose of Congress is to act as a co-equal branch, and John McCain always asserted that co-equalness. And we've seen Congress and the Senate giving up that, the Senate not as much as the House of Representatives. So John McCain actually was trying to live out his life as a public servant, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are so touched by John McCain, because you always get the sense that maybe alone among that club of 100, he sensed that his service as a senator was the second most important act of public service he has committed. And so, you have these people who are walking around quite officiously impressed with themselves, and you never got the sense that John McCain was impressed with himself, and yet the substance of what he did, as you've alluded to, was so important.
Yeah, and the minority leader, Chuck Schumer, says he has introduced a resolution to rename the Russell Senate office building after his dear friend. Let's just listen to that.
And I'd like, decades from now, little children to ask their parents, who was John McCain? And they'll explain his sacrifice, his patriotism, and most of all, his fidelity to do the right thing as he saw it. And when he did the wrong thing, to change.
I do think, we can look back and we could say, for example, that he admitted, Ron, that he was very slow about the Confederate flag issue back in 2000. He does, it seem to be part of a dwindling number of people who have to depend on votes to keep their job, that he was willing to say, I should have done something differently, or I was wrong. And yet, in this moment, we have literally thousands of Trump supporters who were viciously attacking him after he died. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, the progressive in New York, got literally hundreds of vitriolic responses after she tweeted a tribute to him. It seems McCain, almost in his death, is proving one of the major concerns before he died about how divided we have become. You can't even, when someone who was a war hero passes away, keep yourself away from saying something nasty on Twitter. And again, to the point, he wasn't perfect. But really?
But no one is, Chris. And, it's amazing that we, as we should, hold our elected officials to a somewhat higher standard. But perfection is not one that can be attained by anybody. I mean, there may have been some people in history who tried to attain it. John McCain was very vocal in saying that he was not perfect. None of us is, as we said. And it is disappointing. It's disillusioning that from the White House on down, people cannot find the grace to just offer a kind word to someone who has passed, who fought not only this difficult battle, but an extraordinary battle earlier in his life when he was in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam.
And had a chance to be released and would not be released.
Yeah.
I mean,
And look,
6 years.
yeah.
6 years, yes. And you know, he was an honorable man. Those of us who knew him and who covered him and who spent time either on TV or on radio with him, you know, found him to be quite genial, you know, quite self-deprecating on many occasions, and was always able to cross party lines. He was, as some people said, Hillary Clinton's drinking buddy for a period of time. They could, in fact, cross that line, and I think that was, you know, something important and something that, if is not dying, may have already died. We're not sure where we are in this divide, but it is great. It is an enormous breach, and it's going to take someone special to cross over and achieve the types of things he did when he was in the Senate.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Bill, you have the question of these very big shoes that have to be filled, and you have someone who attained a level that most people in the Senate never attained in terms of their influence. We have Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who is going to be able to select now who is going to replace John McCain. Will it be someone, do you think, in McCain's mold? Should that happen out of respect for him, or is it more likely to be someone who is more aligned with Donald Trump?
You know, I don't know. I hope personally it's someone more aligned with the general worldview of John McCain. I mean, one thing I would add here is what he cared about the most was the defense of America, but also what America stood for liberty and liberty around the world. All the tributes are coming in from foreign leaders, and that's nice. But for me, what's more moving is the tributes from foreign dissidents, ex-dissidents, current dissidents, people whom McCain spoke up with and for and met with around the world. I hope it's someone who stands for those principles, but I don't know what will happen. Obviously, those shoes can't be filled entirely, obviously. But I think, again, McCain would say, you know, if you look at American history, we didn't know ahead of time who the great leaders would be. A lot of people came out of obscurity and out of different backgrounds and ended up really doing remarkable things. And he had a faith in America. And I guess I have some of that faith, too, and I'm not quite as convinced that that whole tradition is dead or dying or couldn't be we can't have a comeback in a different way. Both the bipartisanship and the standing up for liberty, the civility, the decency, the courage, you know, that's really an important part of it, just being willing to take some risks in politics. And obviously McCain, having gone through what he had gone through, the risks seemed a little less daunting, I think, to a lot of these other characters for whom, you know, having a tough election is the worst thing they can imagine happening to them in their life.
Hey, Chris, what's interesting to me, and as I wax nostalgic, not just over Senator McCain, but you look at the class of senators and representatives that some of us, you know, started our career with, the Bob Doles, the Sam Nunns, the Alan Simpsons, and others who are these days lions of our political culture. And they were a different breed of character. I mean, they did cross the aisle. They did do the necessary things when called upon. And they did not necessarily only focus on party and ideology. And I think the group that we have in the halls of Congress today is radically different from the group that John McCain served with in his earlier days. And I, while I'm hopeful, as Bill is, I do worry that there is a stark and radical difference between elected representatives today and those that many of us knew in prior iterations.
I think
if I could add one word, Chris, just
Sure.
I think what John would have said, McCain might have said, though, is some of the younger post 9/11 veterans whom McCain mentored in the Senate and in the House, actually, and Democrats and Republicans, they have a little more of that spirit of John McCain. So just to be hopeful here, I do think some of the younger members would like to model themselves on McCain and not on what they see among some of the people around them.
Yeah, who understand the philosophy of Band of Brothers.
To what you were saying, though, Ron, I think the big difference is not the politicians. I think it's us. I think where we are. I think we are polarized. And that is not something the politicians are created. That's something the politicians are reflecting.
Yeah.
And it does not surprise me that Donald Trump superfans would come out against McCain. They'd be hypocrites not to. It does not surprise me that Ocasio-Cortez
Wait a minute. They'd be
tweeters-
hypocrites not to. You just don't tweet. You don't attack someone and
You shouldn't, but have you seen what the
Well, they wouldn't be
what the
hypocritical
president
not to
has
do it. We
created?
know where they stand. We know where they stand, and that's okay. People can have policy differences,
Yeah.
but at the time of the death of somebody who served his country virtually his entire life.
Right. It is an indecent thing to do, but a hallmark of this presidency is indecency, which is my point. And while Trump might be the exception, I do think we have become polarized for structural reasons, for the problem or what was once seen as the solution of of ideological purity within the party. And I wanted to say about both sides, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her supporters look at McCain and say, this is a guy who is in favor of 9 of the last 3 wars. And I mean those statistics. He was always in favor of going to war. Why would they like him? So my point is that when you talk about the senators that were, and McCain is in that class, I think it more is a reflection of an America that was and isn't anymore.
Kelly, I mentioned at the top that you have a kind of unique insight into Senator McCain. You covered the 2008 presidential run against then Senator Barack Obama. So I just wanted to play a few key moments from your reporting when Senator McCain had to play referee with some of his supporters during that time. Let's listen.
I'm mad. I'm really mad.
And voiced suspicions and fears.
We're scared. We're scared of an Obama presidency.
McCain was stuck and ended up defending the rival he wants to defeat.
I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that you do not have to be scared as President of the United States. Now,
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No.
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues.
Kelly, we often talk about John McCain, how he defended his rival when we saw what that woman had to say about Barack Obama. But I think mentioned less often, he also did it very kindly, very respectfully. He was not out to admonish or embarrass that woman. He was out, however, to set the record straight. And it struck me this morning that Mark Salter, who, of course, was his sort of co-writer, his longtime speechwriter who knew him so well over the decades, said that decency is what really drove the guy, is the way Mark Salter put it. Is that what you would say as someone who has covered him all these years?
Well, and memories flood back from those moments where I was in the room when those supporters and voters would challenge McCain. And one of the things that was part of his brand was taking endless questions from voters, which by its very nature is unpredictable, and being willing to do what it is hard to imagine most politicians of this moment being willing to do, and that is to tell someone you're seeking their vote, their support, that they are somehow wrong or incorrect or misinformed. That's a difficult thing to do. And I was struck by how that was something, for all his bombast and all of his fire, he did it quietly and politely. He also at times would do that when, in politics at rallies, there are always speakers who come before the candidate, and occasionally there would be those who would speak to a crowd waiting to see McCain in 2008, who would say things that were critical of Barack Obama in this lane, not about ideas and policy, but much more personal attacks on him. And McCain would rebuke that as well. And we're talking about weeks before the election. I remember that day with the woman in Minnesota so vividly. That's not a position a politician wants to be in. They want to have the momentum in their favor. And yet that moment where he had to make a decision in a split second endures 10 years later and will endure many years beyond today, because he was willing to do without checking with a consultant or contemplating his poll numbers. He just spoke what he felt was right in a reassuring way to those voters, not telling them they were simply wrong, but that the country would be okay in the hands of someone like Barack Obama if he could not beat him. And let's be clear, when he conceded, that was heartbreaking for John McCain. He wanted to be president. He ran twice and believed he would have been a good president. But he also believed the country's future was far more important than his own. And that's the thing that is rare. And that's what's worth remembering about John McCain today, this week, and for a long time to come. Chris?
Well said. Imagine that you could actually choose to do the right thing without focus grouping it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.